Alaska has fully entered late autumn. In Tanana, 200 residents are either busy hunting or stocking up on firewood for winter heating, as the harsh winter could arrive overnight. Meanwhile, Stan and his son Joey are lagging far behind other townspeople as they retrieve their fishing water wheel. They adjust the net to the right height and secure the water wheel and boat together with steel cables. Then they can start the boat and take it back to the fishing camp 2 kilometers away. Joey wants to finish quickly so he can devote himself fully to hunting. The entire fishing water wheel is dragged ashore by a diesel winch. The winch's pulling power is sufficient, and the water wheel is secure. But the steel cable, as thick as a pinky finger, snaps under tens of thousands of pounds of tension, even with pulleys added, indicating immense force. The snap of the cable is as dangerous as flying bullets. But fortunately, Stan and Joey are unharmed. It takes them a day to repair the winch and safely drag the water wheel. Already behind schedule, they must hurry to bring the catch back as it starts to rain. Stan plans to build a hollow log raft, layering fishing nets and a waterproof cloth in the middle. This allows transporting all the fish in one go, while using the cold river water to cool them. The downside is the sharp rocks underwater that could tear the nets and cloth, potentially wasting weeks of effort. High risk means high reward, and Stan enjoys a challenge. After setting up the nets, they cover them with a waterproof cloth. If all goes well, the double layer should provide enough protection. They then transfer the salmon one by one to the raft. The process is significant, and soon the water inside the raft turns bright red. Hours later, Stan loads 1,400 salmon under another layer of waterproof cloth for the return journey. He travels 60 kilometers on the Yukon River back to Tanana, carrying a year's supply of food for his sled dogs. Any mistake is costly. Last year, Stan mentioned that $4,000 worth of leather would cover his yearly expenses, and these fish represent half a year's income for his family. Approximately over $2,000 in value, equating to about $1.5 per 7 to 8 pound salmon. The actual value is much higher than the economic one, as $2,000 worth of dog food wouldn't sustain several dogs for a year. 5 hours later, Stan safely returns to Tanana. He removes the covering cloth to check for any rocks that might have hit the raft. Everything seems normal until he disembarks, and an accident occurs. The cloth covering the fish gets tangled with the propeller, completely disabling the boat. Stan quickly secures the raft ashore. While the engine can be repaired, lost fish cannot be replaced. After securing the catch, they clear the entangled propeller. The fish are back, but the work isn't over yet. The salmon must be transferred several more times from capture to final product, a time-consuming and laborious process, but well worth the effort. Besides Stan, other town residents also experienced a bountiful fishing season. The Moore family, who own 45 sled dogs, earn a net profit of $6,000 a year from raising these dogs. They feed the dogs salmon, boiling whole fish directly in water, providing many times the protein of beef. Since Moore needs to care for the dogs, Thomas will handle this year's hunting season. Meanwhile, Courtney proposed that she wants to hunt a moose, even though in Tanana, hunting is typically a male task. Moore hesitated to agree because hunting moose requires purchasing a specific permit, and failing to hunt one would waste the permit. Courtney had previously hunted reindeer with friends during the summer, and now wanted to prove that women are just as capable as men by hunting a moose. Moore agreed, and registered the permit for her. Courtney then prepared some bullets and set off on the hunting path with a shotgun. Whether she could hunt a 1,000-pound moose was uncertain. Early today, she and her husband Agnes went hunting by boat, traveling 170 kilometers southwest of Tanana to a preferred moose habitat near the Yukon River. Moose hunting is typically done early in the morning or just at sunset, especially during the mating season when males can be seen with several females. The Yukon River basin spans over 300,000 square miles, and local indigenous peoples have hunted moose here for 1,100 years. Tracing back to the first Asians who crossed from the Bering Sea during the Ice Age, hunting in the bushy area sometimes relies more on scent and sound than sight, as males attract females with urine and low mating calls. After a hard search, they spotted a robust male moose across the river. Approaching by boat was rare due to the proximity to the river. As they got closer, Courtney saw how large the moose was but wasn't intimidated, silently loading large-caliber bullets into her shotgun, using iron sights. The first shot is crucial in hunting such large animals, as a provoked moose might charge. Facing the moose, she took her shot when it turned to show its side. The first shot was low, missing the vital areas and grazing the leg. Seeing the moose heading for the bushes, Courtney quickly took another shot, successfully downing it before it could escape. It turns out that when women get tough, their husbands have little to do. This moose was the largest Courtney had ever seen, evident from its massive antlers. Locals measure a moose's size not by its weight, but by the widest span of its antlers, which for this one was between 1.6 to 1.7 meters. Afterward, Courtney called other family members hunting nearby to help. It takes a long time to butcher such a large moose alone. They would also share some of the meat with elders in the tribe, a common practice when others in the town hunted moose. They also noticed many fresh bear tracks in the area. During late autumn, not only do humans need to stock up meat for winter, but brown bears also need to accumulate fat for hibernation. They quickly butchered the moose, which was very fatty at this time of year, quickly disassembling the large animal. The moose's heart alone was as big as a watermelon, and they packed all the meat in bags to take away. The remaining scene was too gory to describe. This moose produced about 600 pounds of quality meat. They then transported the meat to the boat in batches. Fortunately, the hunting spot was not far from the boat. They had to cut off a section of the antlers, as hunting regulations stipulate that hunters making a living from hunting are not allowed to sell complete antlers. This rule is to protect the local moose population. In the past, poachers would hunt male moose and leave behind the carcass after taking just the head. They loaded the moose head onto the boat and started their return journey with the winter meat provisions. Moore and Thomas were waiting at the dock. Moore was stunned to learn that Courtney had hunted the moose, but he was also proud that his daughter had managed to hunt such a large one. A moose with antlers spanning 1.65 meters is rare, and Courtney had surpassed many of the town's seasoned male hunters. This moose was the largest hunted in the town this year. Thomas mentioned that in his over a decade of hunting, only 2 moose had exceeded this size. They then transported the meat to the smokehouse using a vehicle. The several hundred pounds of deer meat were stored there, giving them the courage to face the harsh winter. Besides the Moore family, other residents of the town were also preparing for the hunting season. However, kind-hearted Charlie had other tasks. He and his daughter loaded collected logs onto a truck to deliver to community elders who couldn't go out. Here, no elder would freeze without firewood or starve without meat. After completing these tasks, Charlie took his gun bag and boarded a small boat. It was now his turn to hunt for winter meat. They had only 20 days to hunt, and each family needed at least 600 to 700 pounds of meat to get through the winter. Charlie, his brother Shane, and his father-in-law Tom would hunt together, traveling 40 kilometers along the Yukon River to their family's usual moose hunting grounds, an area full of swamps and bushes, ideal for moose. An adult male moose typically weighs around 1,400 to 1,500 pounds, though some robust ones can reach up to 2,000 pounds and stand between 2 to 3 meters tall. Despite their size, these animals can still hide well among the bushes. While searching, Charlie mimicked moose calls, as it was mating season and males would emerge to compete. However, after 4 hours of searching without seeing any, they returned to their boat. Just then, they spotted 2 moose, one large and one small, crossing the river. They quickly loaded their shotguns as the river was over 100 meters wide. They fired 2 shots before the moose could reach the trees and enter the forest, unsure if they had hit their targets. They crossed to the other side to check. After reaching the opposite bank and following the moose into the forest, they hoped to find signs of an injured animal. Just when they thought the moose had completely escaped, they came upon a fresh trail of blood. This indicated the animal was indeed injured, and severely so, given the amount of blood. Unexpectedly, after following the trail for several hundred meters, the blood trail suddenly disappeared. Hunting regulations strictly prohibit allowing wounded game to escape, so they were determined to find the moose. The 3 decided to split up and search the small island they were on. They knew they had to find it, even if it meant searching every inch of the island. Finally, the next morning, they spotted the injured moose by the riverbank and shot again, causing it to fall directly onto the river beach. The moose weighed around 1,100 pounds, relatively small for its species, but sufficient to start their winter provisions. Although this moose wasn't enough for 3 families to survive the winter, it was a good start. Charlie sliced open the moose's neck with a small knife, and bright red blood spurted out instantly. After some time, They directly packed the entire moose. Charlie skewered some of the meat on branches, sprinkled it with salt, and roasted it by the campfire. They even roasted the moose's leg bones to eat the rare marrow inside. The meat, rich in fat this season, tasted the best all year, while those who dislike moose meat find it bland. Native populations, who have traditionally relied on it, cherish it greatly. Most importantly, this meat is completely natural, ensuring it is healthy and pollution-free. Many residents of the town had hunted moose, except for James, who was taking care of his puppies. It wasn't that he didn't want to hunt, but his sled dogs had recently had 2 litters, and the puppies couldn't be left alone. In the afternoon, the lively group of puppies had a few missing by feeding time in the evening. Upon checking the smokehouse where the fish meat was stored, James found 2 puppies dead. He suspected a gastrointestinal virus, having encountered this before. Such a virus can kill puppies within 24 hours. To prevent other puppies from getting infected, the dead ones had to be dealt with, and several others showed signs of infection, appearing quite unwell. The next day, he added a small amount of chlorine to the fish soup he fed the dogs, similar to how chlorine is used to kill bacteria in tap water. With no vet in Tanana, they had to solve these problems themselves. Over the next few days, no more puppies died, and those that had been unwell recovered, indicating the treatment worked. With the puppies fully recovered, James now needed to find time to hunt moose. On the other side of town, 22-year-old Joey was also preparing to go hunting. Already one of the town's most respected hunters, Stan had entrusted him with the task of hunting for winter meat. With just 2 days left in the hunting season, failing to hunt would mean no moose meat for the winter. He visited James, who hadn't been hunting because he needed to care for his sick dogs. Meat was crucial for both families. Another reason for his visit was to borrow a canoe from James. In exchange, James asked him to take his 14-year-old son, Francis, with him to learn moose hunting skills from a skilled hunter. Equipped with necessary shotguns and a stove, and prepared to possibly spend the night outdoors if they didn't make a catch, they set out to hunt in the Tanana River area, 30 kilometers southeast of town. This area, with many small river basins, was hopeful for spotting moose. However, after circling around for 5 hours without seeing any game, Joey parked the boat at an inland lake with a large meadow. He sent Francis to check for any sign of moose. Carefully observing, Francis saw 2 dark shadows that looked like moose on the other side of the lake. Too far to determine their sex, he quickly ran back to inform Joey. They used binoculars from where the moose were spotted. Indeed, there were 2 moose, but it was a mother with her calf. During the hunting season, only male moose were legal targets, regardless of antler size. These 2 were off limits. With no catch that day, and the northern lights appearing overhead, Joey and Francis built a campfire to spend the night outdoors. With only 1 day left in the hunting season, the pressure was mounting on them. They could only hope for better luck tomorrow. On the other side, James and a good friend were also searching for moose. He couldn't rely solely on his son, Francis. The 2 scanned an inland lake but saw no moose. James tried to mimic moose calls using a plastic bucket and rope to see if any were hiding in the nearby bushes. They decided to look elsewhere. By the next day, it was their last chance to hunt for winter meat supplies. James continued searching on the river in his boat. Although Alaska is rich in moose, they seem scarce compared to the vast territory. Hours passed, but fortunately they spotted a suitable target in a wetland. However, the distance was quite far, at least 300 meters. Even experienced hunters only have a 50% chance of hitting such a distant target due to the unpredictability of large-caliber bullets. James leaned against a tree and took a long time to aim before finally pulling the trigger, confident he had hit, though unsure of the exact spot or the severity of the injury. After a while, he and his friend reached the location where the moose had been. There were no blood traces on the ground, but they saw footprints from the escape. Just as they were processing this, James quickly fired a shot into the bushes and discovered the moose lying on the ground. It was the same one they had seen by the riverbank. They then proceeded with the task of handling the carcass. Meanwhile, Joey and Francis were still searching for a target. Today, they planned to use a canoe to explore an inland lake. Food-rich wetlands like this should have male moose. Joey found some moose tracks by the lake and later, urine traces in the forest. These signs indicated a male moose was indeed nearby. They searched from morning till evening, but couldn't find the moose. Worse, Several wolf howls from afar indicated the presence of predators, which meant grazing animals would avoid the area. The howling also signaled a likely unsuccessful hunt for them. This was Joey's first failed moose hunt since becoming an adult. His limited hunting time this year had resulted in no winter meat. Back in town, hunters were happiest when they brought back hundreds of pounds of deer meat. James showed his son the large moose he had hunted, weighing about 1,200 pounds, producing around 500 pounds of quality meat. They hung the meat on ropes in the smokehouse for storage. Even without smoking, the meat wouldn't spoil in this season and could be retrieved for winter consumption. James smiled as he looked at the meat filling the smokehouse. At the same time, Charlie was checking his trapping lines. Local hunters have established routes for trapping fur-bearing animals. If others found an unattended trap line, they might claim it for themselves. Upon inspecting his area, he found someone had set up new traps. These angled poles were specifically for trapping mink. Currently, a mink pelt could easily sell for $100, a significant source of income for fur hunters. Charlie pulled out his revolver, ready to investigate further. Town residents were aware of each other's trapping lines and typically wouldn't encroach. After trekking a few kilometers, he saw someone managing the trapping line and realized it was his own son, Bob. If it had been a stranger, Charlie might have greeted them with a bullet. Bob simply wanted to prove to his father that he could manage a trapping line too. Afterward, father and son prepared to hunt another moose together. The last time Charlie and his father-in-law had hunted, the moose was too small to meet the winter needs of 3 families, prompting this second attempt. Most main river areas had been searched by town residents, so success now meant venturing into less accessible inland areas. They paddled the canoe through a wetland in search of water, then moved into the forest. These water sources and nearby wetlands are often moose habitats, but finding a legal bull moose to hunt is still challenging. Experienced hunters don't miss any clues, such as scratches on bushes left by bull moose rubbing their antlers, which appeared to be very recent. Charlie tapped the bushes with a stick, a tactic to provoke a bull moose during the rutting season, as they don't tolerate rivals in their territory. However, this method was ineffective, and the moose did not appear, forcing them to continue searching through the forest. The good news was they found some moose tracks. With these tracks, their chances of finding their target increased. Following the tracks, they reached another wetland and spotted a moose feeding. Taking advantage of the moose's distraction, they quickly aimed their rifles. Bob took the shot and secured the game. This moose was small, its body evident even as it lay in the water, lacking the large antlers typical of other moose. Initially, they thought they had hunted a female until Charlie grabbed the antlers and realized it was a young bull, then began skinning and butchering it. This bull was only slightly larger than a reindeer, likely between 1 to 2 years old. It had not yet enjoyed the pleasures of full growth before becoming hunters' food. This meat, tenderer than that of older moose, was bagged and loaded onto the boat. On the last day of the trapping season, they successfully secured enough meat for their family and returned to Tanana with the joy of a successful hunt. Stan had assigned the hunting tasks to Joey, while he prepared firewood for the winter, a task that should have been done weeks ago but was delayed due to purchasing a boat and the fishing season. Now he had to finish the wood storage before winter set in. His daughter, who was attending university 240 kilometers away in Fairbanks and was home for the holidays, helped him. Stan sawed the logs and she loaded them, doubling their efficiency. They stacked the cut wood in the woodshed to be split into firewood when time allowed during the winter. Afterward, Stan took out a string of smoked salmon, each piece a meal for one of his 12 sled dogs. Today, he discovered that the lead husky had developed a tumor in its abdomen, which could be fatal if not treated promptly. The nearest pet hospital was in Fairbanks, 500 kilometers away, making a round trip impractical. Stan turned to his friend John, a former medical assistant who had experience with veterinary friends. After examining the dog, John determined the lump was a hardened abscess that could potentially develop into sepsis. With no proper medical facilities in their small town of 200 people, they used a table as an improvised operating table. After a tense half-hour surgery, the hardened tumor was successfully removed. The lead dog would stay with John for a few days to recover, its future in sled pulling uncertain. In Tanana, thousands of fish serve as dog food, with fatty lampreys provided as extra nourishment. Only the large bull moose serve as the main winter food supply for the people. Trapping fur-bearing animals is a primary economic activity, with each large animal bringing in several $100s. Most Tanana residents had secured their winter meat supply, except for Stan's family, as the hunting season had just ended and signs of a harsh winter were already appearing. Securing meat was crucial, but more pressing tasks awaited, such as pulling boats ashore from the Yukon River. Sometimes delaying by even a day meant the river would freeze and trap the boats. Stan went to the river and noticed Joey's boat still in the water. This summer, Joey had bought a house and moved out, but it seemed he wasn't fully prepared to face his first winter alone. Many fathers might have pulled their son's boat ashore for them, but Stan chose not to. He only transported his own boat back home on a trailer. Sometimes, life lessons are better taught through experience rather than instruction. At home, Stan simply told Joey, "It's time to bring the boat back." Joey, having not caught any moose during the hunting season, was focused on hunting for meat. He thought there was no rush to pull the boat as long as the river hadn't frozen. Despite his father's advice, he didn't listen and continued to hunt, believing in filling his freezer with meat to face the harsh winter. His lack of experience with Alaska's sudden weather changes showed. He set out with his weapons, ropes, water, and other survival gear, heading into the woods for the fall moose hunting season, which targets moose until it ends, after which reindeer can be hunted. Alaska has hundreds of thousands of reindeer, and there are no seasonal restrictions on hunting them. However, finding them is difficult, as they are elusive. After trekking in the forest for a while and seeing a winter storm forming at the mountaintop, Joey spent 3 hours without spotting any game, and decided to try his luck at the mountaintop. Not only did he not see any reindeer, but a vast expanse of frost was also visible, indicating a winter storm moving down the mountain much faster than he expected. Winter had arrived, and the reindeer had already migrated. Joey's dream of hunting reindeer was dashed. Perhaps he should have heeded his father's advice to pull the boat ashore. His new home lacked even a basic fireplace, forcing him to quickly descend the mountain to prepare for winter. The next day, the temperature in the area dropped below freezing, and overnight, the town was covered in snow. Ice floes appeared on the Yukon River. Joey rushed to pull his boat ashore. Delaying another day would mean having to break ice to retrieve it. He realized the importance of this task too late. Normally, he could easily pull the boat ashore with his car, but now the icy riverbank reduced tire traction, making it impossible to pull the boat out. Just when he and his friends were at a loss, Stan arrived with his truck. Sometimes letting young people face hardships teaches them to take the extreme weather of the region seriously. The task impossible by hand was effortlessly done with the truck. Realizing his grave mistake, Joey pulled the boat ashore but still had a lot more to do. The log cabin he bought needed repairs at multiple spots like windows, floorboards, and walls, as these gaps would lead to significant heat loss in winter. The stairs at the entrance and, most importantly, the stove for heating were crucial. Joey's house lacked a fuel stove. The wood stove was his only source of heating for the winter. Stan installed an insulated chimney for him. When Stan first came to Alaska, he lived alone in the wilderness for 11 years. Now he was passing on his valuable survival knowledge to Joey, perhaps the only way to ensure the young man could thrive here. With the stove installed, Joey frantically stocked up on firewood. Having not collected driftwood from the river in summer, he had to cut down dead trees in the forest and haul them back to the cabin on a snowmobile, cutting and splitting them into firewood. These tasks were straightforward physical labor. That evening, many relatives gathered at Joey's new home. Joey's grandmother, a minister in the town since the Gold Rush era, represented a coexistence of local traditions and Christianity. They read the Bible and held a prayer ceremony for the household's and relatives' safety and health. After the ceremony, it marked Joey as fully independent, managing his own household. The fishing water wheel on the river was introduced to North America from China during the Gold Rush, allowing Alaska's indigenous people to harvest thousands of salmon each year. The Moore family's dried fish hanging by the river and on the ground were all caught using this water wheel. With winter approaching, they also needed to haul the water wheel ashore. The Moore family, who owned dozens of sled dogs along with other chores, specifically hired a worker from North Carolina named Dustin. However, he lacked experience in surviving in Alaska and had never seen a fishing water wheel before. While the Thomas brothers were busy raising the fishing nets, Dustin was unsure of what to do. The process of deploying and retrieving the water wheel is complex, but trivial compared to the fish it catches. They only managed to dismantle the fixed parts of the water wheel and move it to the riverside by the end of the afternoon. Without large machinery available today, they had to wait until the next day to continue the project, hoping that the Yukon River wouldn't freeze overnight. On the other side of Tanana, Charlie was rushing to transport a snowmobile before the river froze. Before departing, he filled up the portable fuel tank. Ice was already forming along the riverbank, leaving them little time. After everything was prepared, his son Bob was nowhere to be found, leaving Charlie without options. 3 hours later, Bob finally showed up. With urgent tasks at hand, Charlie had no time to reprimand him. Charlie was headed to his birth village about 70 kilometers from Tanana, where he had collected firewood in the summer and fished for king crabs during the fishing season. A few hours later, they arrived at their destination with the bow of their boat already covered in thick ice. They had to get the most out of the boat before leaving the Yukon River, which meant transporting the snowmobile. From its appearance, the snowmobile was quite old, but following the philosophy that if the engine turns, it can be fixed, and if it moves, it shouldn't be replaced, Charlie and his son used a vehicle to pull the snowmobile to the riverbank. With the help of a few friends, they loaded the snowmobile onto the boat, confident that with some repairs, it could be as good as new. As more ice floated on the river, they hurried back. Despite their efforts, drifting ice blocked their way. The river had been clear of ice just 2 to 3 hours earlier. With the water temperature now below freezing, they had to reduce transmission speed and crush through the ice. The propeller clacked against the ice blocks, but fortunately, this was only for a few hundred meters, as some faster-moving parts of the river had not yet frozen. If Bob hadn't delayed those few hours earlier, they might not have encountered this situation. Overnight, Tanana experienced its first snowfall of the year. Today, the Moore family had to haul the fishing water wheel ashore or risk losing it. Thomas borrowed the town's only bulldozer, a robust 1960s military model that had previously moved Joey's log cabin without issue. The fish wheel was no challenge for it. On the other side, Charlie and his son returned to town just before dark yesterday and had to haul their boat ashore today. The indigenous people living here continuously prepare, gathering supplies in the summer for the winter and vice versa. The only real rest might come when one lies in a coffin. While Charlie was retrieving the boat, Bob went to the town's recycling center where residents discard unwanted cars and snowmobiles. There's no hardware store or repair shop in town, so they come here for parts. Bob was looking for an engine carburetor and fuel tank, common parts that are easy to find on any snowmobile. He even found an extra carburetor for backup, ready to repair the snowmobile they had brought back. Watching his son seriously repairing the vehicle, Charlie felt that Bob was not entirely useless after all. Snowmobiles became a common mode of transport for residents of Alaska 50 years ago. However, due to various extreme weather conditions, they often malfunction. Almost everyone who rides a snowmobile knows how to fix one, and the repairs are not too complicated. The engine mainly consists of the cylinder block, carburetor, spark plug, and ignition coil. As long as these parts are functioning, other issues are generally straightforward to handle. Bob replaced the unusable parts and even specifically checked the cylinder pressure to ensure there were no major issues. On the other side, Moore's hired worker, Dustin, was preparing firewood for heating. Experiencing his first Alaskan winter, he estimated that the small cabin would need a ton of firewood for the season. He borrowed Moore's truck to transport the wood, but accidentally shattered the rear window during loading. Having been in Tanana for only 2 weeks, he had made more mistakes than others might in a year. Knowing he might be fired, he immediately informed Moore about the incident and promised to pay for the glass repair. Moore came outside to assess the damage. The glass was badly shattered but had not fallen out. Moore was understandably frustrated but did not scold Dustin or fire him, recognizing how hard it is to survive alone in Alaska. He found some cardboard and tape to seal the broken glass, which had to be heated with a heat gun before use due to the cold. This summer, Joey bought a house planning to live independently. Now that the trapping season had started, he wanted to establish his own trapping line. His first plan after acquiring fur was to replace his old snowmobile, which was in very poor condition. The tie rod ends were held together with wire, and plastic parts were patched with rope. Aside from the horn, which didn't work, every other part made noise. Driving an old run-down snowmobile for tens of kilometers in the wilderness was risky. Before setting traps, Joey needed to pick up some equipment from his father's house. At that time, Stan was at home, sharpening axes and knives. In 4 weeks, the region would enter the polar night phase, with 20 hours of darkness each day. It was already getting dark before even leaving the house, let alone conducting trapping activities. This year, he had bought many new animal traps specifically for Joey, though some of the larger ones needed chains attached, which he had already prepared by cutting them to the right length to connect to the traps. These large traps were intended for capturing big game like wolves. Joey arrived just as Stan was hanging up the wolf traps. Last trapping season, father and son had clashed over differing opinions. This year, Stan did not interfere with Joey's trapping line, but he was concerned about the snowmobile's safety. It had nearly 40,000 kilometers on it. Stan suggested a thorough check before use, but Joey, eager to make money quickly, ignored his father's advice and drove off to his trapping line. As Joey left, Stan began packing his own gear, including dried fish for food, a shotgun, and a bag of bait for setting traps. His transportation was a team of huskies. Stan's trapping line was 50 kilometers north of the town, in the same direction as Joey's, but while one focused on capturing mink, the other was intent on catching wolves. Joey arrived at a bushy area with wolf tracks, an ideal spot to set a trap. He took out some snares and a large animal trap, then cut down a cedar tree to stabilize the traps. The bait was a piece of fish that emitted a strong odor. He dug a snow pit to bury the bait and placed the traps and snares around it. After setting up, he moved on to the next location to continue his work. On the other side, Stan was restoring last year's trapping line, using Cisco fish caught in the summer as bait. Stan preferred trapping mink because, aside from being easier to catch, their fur was quite valuable, several times more expensive per area than that of gray wolf. The residents of Tanana mostly relied on trapping for their income, though some families, like James with his wood sales and the Moores with their sled dogs, had other sources of income. At that time, Joey had already set up 6 gray wolf traps and met up with his father at his trapping line. Stan could tell something was off with the snowmobile just by hearing it running. It sounded like the connecting rod and crankshaft were colliding. Joey thought it was still functional and didn't worry about it. On their way back, they planned to check the traps Joey set in the morning. The trapping path, surrounded by branches, was suitable for predators like gray wolves and bobcats, but it was too soon for a catch. Joey decided to return in a few days to check again. Just then, his snowmobile wouldn't start. With 40 kilometers back to town and only 2 hours until dark, Joey regretted not heeding his father's advice to check the vehicle. He opened the engine hood to investigate, starting with the spark plug, an easy part to carry and replace. After changing it and still failing to start, he checked the ignition coil wires. He noticed the high-pressure line from the pump was disconnected from the spark plug. After stripping a section of insulation with his knife, he tried to reconnect it, but couldn't. Using iron wire from his trapping tools, he linked the two, hoping it would work. Otherwise, he'd have to walk back. After several attempts, the engine finally started, and he hurried towards town. The first thing Joey did at home was repair the snowmobile. While he knew basic troubleshooting, real repairs required Stan's expertise. Besides the ignition coil issue, the snowmobile's carburetor was problematic. It had water inside that froze. Last year's fur income barely covered this year's expenses for Stan. Their comfort next year would depend entirely on this winter's efforts and the success of their trapping line. After Stan's repairs, the snowmobile wasn't perfect, but was reliable enough for short-term use without engine troubles.